Thank you, everybody, for joining us for our second webinar in the Conservation Tourism series. In our first webinar, we touched on why nature and wildlife conservation is absolutely critical to Sri Lanka's tourism industry. In today's webinar, we will discuss how conserving biodiversity can benefit your specific tourism business. Unlike the pandemic, the effects of which are temporary, and we're already seeing a nice pickup in tourism, biodiversity loss and the climate crisis are largely irreversible. So the impact, if we go on at the current rate, will be several multiples of the impact of the pandemic, if and when it happens, and hopefully not, if we do something about it. Previously, we spoke about the concept of ecotourism as being a niche option. That is no longer the case. All tourism needs to be ecologically sensitive. This is essential for the survival of our industry and what customers are increasingly demanding. The tourism industry should no longer look at ecotourism as a segment they can choose to be in or not. It is something which we have to bring in and intertwine to all our businesses, wherever we are operating and whatever scale we have. As an industry, we have not lobbied policymakers about safeguarding our natural assets, which, as we discussed in the previous webinar, is a primary reason tourists visit Sri Lanka. We have thought of it as somebody else's problem. This has to change as the industry is in jeopardy otherwise. Every image you see on Instagram is someone sitting on a waterfall, is someone on a river, is someone on the side of a beach, on a wildlife experience, and so on. People don't come here for the casinos, they don't come here for shopping, they don't come here for many other reasons. They may go to other countries. They come for our biodiversity by and large. So this is what we're going to talk about today with our eminent group of panelists. A little bit about the Tourism Alliance. Membership is growing nicely. We now have over 1,700 members. Membership is free and open to all segments of society, all segments of the industry rather. Our objective is to drive sustainable tourism, visitor growth, benefiting all segments. Betterment of Sri Lanka tourism is our only goal. lovesrilanka.org is our consumer site. We're also very active on social media channels, and this is positioning Sri Lanka's attractions to travelers overseas and locally. And then the SriLankaTourismAlliance.com is our trade, our industry site. I invite you to visit it if you haven't already. We have learning tools, industry news, reports, and also a very important jobs portal. I never thought they would see the light of day when we developed it 2 years ago, because obviously people weren't hiring. But now there's a lot of activity and people are looking for recruits. There's a lot of movement in the industry. So we will go live with this jobs portal, which is dedicated to the tourism industry and has a lot of state-of-the-art features which your common generic sites don't have. So please look out for this. This will launch in about a couple of weeks. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panelists that we have today. Javana, Fernando, owner and founder of Kulu Safaris and Haritha Collection. His unrivaled wealth of experience and knowledge is drawn from over 25 years in the field. He has worked with the likes of Disney, involved in Monkey Kingdom, Nat Geo for their Wild Sri Lanka program, which I'm sure many have seen. He's also worked with award-winning photographers and this big cat specialist, Steve Winter. Kulu is one of Sri Lanka's pioneering sustainable wildlife camps. They were the first to establish a game camp in Sri Lanka and practice environmentally conscious camping. Like the other panelists, here he was ahead of his time, and we should encourage everybody who's watching this webinar also to look at being a lot more eco and to weave it into everything that we do. Souhaine Malalgoda is the owner and founder of Banyan Camp and Soul Riders Bike Tours. He's a passionate lover of Sri Lanka's wildlife and nature, and Banyan Camp set the standard in environmentally friendly and sustainable design principles. The property is almost entirely community driven, which is a beautiful concept. You see that in a few other businesses in Sri Lanka, with the community directly benefiting from the success of the business. And this post-pandemic is really what the new traveler is looking for. Younger travelers the new generations are looking for that level of community engagement, and Souhaine epitomizes that. So Banyan offers a truly conscious and soulful holiday experience where visitors can immerse in the therapeutic power of nature and experience the beauty of rural Sri Lanka. So that's another example of going off the beaten track. His camps are in unusual rural locations. It's not on this conventional circuit that is how Sri Lanka is sadly primarily featured as. There's a lot more. We need to go outside the conventional areas. Hashan Cooray is manager marketing and business strategy at Jetwing, which is obviously a household name in the hotel industry. And for a large hotel company, it is heartening to see how sensitive they are to ecology and how they have pivoted to what consumers are looking for. He's a third generation hotelier, driven to show the best of Sri Lanka to travelers from around the world. Jetwing is one of Sri Lanka's leading hospitality brands with a strong focus on conserving the environment, which from a very early stage, which his father Hiran obviously and Shiromal inculcated at a very early stage. So this is something, not anything new to Jetwing, but it's nice to see one of the larger hotel companies also following this strategy. Conserving the planet, natural and man-made assets for future generation of travelers to enjoy is something close to Hashan and Jetwing's heart. So before I close, I just want to conclude saying that protecting our biodiversity is what tourists come for. That's primarily what they come, and that's how they occupy your hotel rooms. So please listen closely to what these gentlemen have to say and see what we can pick up from that to protect our own collective futures. Thank you. Over to you, Niranga.
Thank you, Malik. Welcome again, everyone, to the second webinar in our conservation tourism series. Environment, nature, wildlife. These are really the bread and butter of Sri Lanka's tourism. Without them, our industry simply wouldn't exist. Most of our tourists who come to Sri Lanka come to enjoy our beautiful beaches and wildlife, the amazing forests and rivers that we have to offer. Thus, protecting our environment shouldn't really be seen as a special CSR activity. It should be intrinsic to our day-to-day operations. In today's webinar, we speak with some leaders in Sri Lanka's tourism industry who have environmental conservation in the DNA of their businesses and their day-to-day operations. We'll also find out about how this benefits their business models. Just a reminder to our virtual audience, we'd love to take your questions at the end of this session and send them to us via Zoom and Facebook. So to begin, Javana, I'd like to direct the first question at you. Thank you for joining us, first of all. You were the first to establish tented safari camping in Sri Lanka. When did you start?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Niranga and the Tourism Alliance. We started mid-2002. There were tented safari camping taking place in Sri Lanka, but we brought in what I would think is something very, very special into Sri Lanka. It was a one-stop shop for anyone who'd come to Sri Lanka for safaris. We had basically everything from South Africa. We tried to compete with the South Africans in an Asian context. So in that sense, we were definitely the first in trying to bring a completely new sort of trend into Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka's wildlife tourism.
Sure. Javana, what inspired you to include nature and wildlife conservation in your business operation?
Well, I must direct that or give all those credit to my mom and dad, because I guess from the age of about 4 or 5, we were taken to all these wilderness areas in Sri Lanka, and then possibly that was 1975. And Sri Lanka was definitely much wilder than what it is now. Yala National Park was still functioning, Bilbatu as well, but most of the other national parks are quite new. So most of them were either strict natural reserves, which were not allowed to go into, but the East Coast was just dotted with wildlife and beachfront. And so that's where we spend most of our, very young years. And I guess, yeah, my mom and dad takes credit for this.
Amazing how our formative years of childhood has so much of an impact on us, as they say. Javana, moving on, what I feel really differentiates your offering from others is that your business is a truly sustainable safari business. As your tagline for Kulu Safaris goes, environmentally conscious camping. On a practical level, what does that mean in your day-to-day operations?
Well, I would say about 10 years ago, we went into a completely no plastic policy. So we basically, no plastic policy, especially with drinking water. We made it a point that no drinking water would be charged to a client. The drinking water in all of our properties are free of charge. And it's basically as much as they want. And we started using glass bottles. We started getting our own small RO plants and our purification plants in each of our properties. And I think that really spun around our no plastic policy to the extent that even our beverage bottles like the Cokes, the Sprites, the whatever beverages we buy are all in glass bottles. It's a bit of a logistical issue because not many places have the glass bottles anymore. But, and of course, you need to have the empty bottles back and the new bottles brought in. So, but I think that created a sort of a spin that allowed us to go completely no plastic on water bottles and beverage bottles. And of course, we recycle our glass bottles as well. So we have almost zero cost on even replacement of our glass bottles or glassware at all.
I think when you started off, especially, that would have been quite new as well to Sri Lanka. Could you tell us anything you've done in the space of maybe renewable energy, eco-friendly waste management, anything in those areas?
Yes, so basically all 4 properties, if you take all 4 properties, we are running about 70% on solar. So basically our electricity is consumed, but we resend back to the national grid about 70% of our consumption. We are trying to get up to 100%, but there are issues with the Ceylon Electricity Board as to how much you can give back in certain areas. We also have been about 10 years at Horathapola, 10 years fully organic. So this whole organic concept in Sri Lanka is nothing new to us, even though I don't think 100% organic is sustainable, but we definitely are one of the top there who've been now for about 10 years fully organic. We compost all our organic waste in all our 4 properties, and then we utilize that for all the forest replantation that we do in all the 4 properties.
Some great points there, Javana. Thank you. Souhaine, I'd like to direct a couple of questions at you. Thanks to you two for joining us. Souhaine, your offering really fits into that category of conscious and soulful. Can you tell us a bit about that, and what are the main draw cards for Banyan Camp?
Oh, no. Hi, Niranga. I born to everybody. Yeah, and good to be on. Basically, with conscious sustainability is a prime card because it's at every level. So from conceptualizing to the build process, as Javana said, the food and water, you know, the sourcing of it, the operational process, or basically even the guests, the experience they have in the, it's an authentic immersive experience. So what we're doing is basically operating off-grid and enabling something which is around us has been a strength. So
having visited your property as well, Souhaine, and it's an amazing property, could you tell us a few ways how guests really immerse themselves in nature? And I know it's in everything they do, but I think our audience would love to hear that.
Because I think nature is never to be rearranged by man. It's perfect as it is, you know, I mean, it's all around us. And if you just can't, I mean, that's all we got to do to get people to experience in its finest form. I mean, we have the best water sources, we have all the greenery that's still there. So, but what we see is repeatedly over the years, the loss of habitat in such a ridiculous level, and which is our biggest issue right now. And as much as we come in for conservation and sustainability and trying to act on it, our biggest issue is we're just losing it at such a space with poisoning our waters at every level. We are killing an elephant a day. There's no sustainability. I mean, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Losing our leopards at a rapid rate, and we just we're struggling with that to face it because our clientele is mainly a very conscious client who's come for a period of time, and yeah, that's our biggest challenge.
I think the biggest takeaway for our listeners there would really be nature is never to be rearranged by man. So thank you for that. Souhaine, I know from our previous chats that being community driven is a major focus for Banyan Camp. Would you share a few words on that with us?
Yeah, I mean, what we've always stressed is to bring the community in to Banyan and where it benefits them. So what we've done is we have basically trained the fishermen as canoe guides. We have actually a few single mothers who have been differently treated by society. You know, they manage all our lawns and gardens. We do have the shepherds doing our walking safaris. So the laundry is done by a family in the village. So what we've done is we have brought in the community in, and it sustains it without us actually trying to bear the burden of running the whole operation. And they all benefit and trickles down to the community. So the community keeps us going.
Sure. Almost as if you're a part of the village itself. Souhaine, where do most of your clients come from?
Clients-wise, I would say the Scandinavians love our concept. They're quite conscious about the footprint. Also, word of mouth is our strongest, I think, exposure and market, because it's that referral and recommendation is what's helping us grow. And that's why I said that conscious client is our main market, and it could be from anywhere, from the expats in the Middle East, or yeah, it's mainly the European and a conscious client.
Sure. Yeah. Souhaine, we hear this term slow travel a lot more now. And essentially this is travel where you don't rush and you really let yourself immerse with the local people and the local cultures. And you have this really inspiring property that has always spoken to slow travel at every touch point. Can you share with our audience maybe some examples of what really appeals to people who come to you to experience this slow travel?
Yeah, what typically has happened in the last 20, 30 years is when somebody lands in Sri Lanka, gets picked up and gets dragged on this tourist trail. So if he's here for 14 days, for 10 days, he's on the road. And that's what the client is looking for, actually. They just need the time to heal, some time to recharge. And what we typically see at Banyan Camp is client spends 3 days, and that's the best 3 days he had, because he comes here for a holiday. He comes here to take some rest and not to be dragged around the country to be as much as we want to show, as much as we want to have. I think that long stay client, staying in one place, recharging, is what they're looking for now. Yeah.
And I think being able to spend all their time in nature, which is possible in your property. Yeah. Thanks, Souhaine. Hashan, I'd like to move on and ask you a few questions. Could you tell us a little bit about Jetwing's investment in conservation, particularly related to wildlife and the environment?
Yeah, so, I mean, we do have a 6-pillared sustainability strategy as Jetwing as a whole. But in terms of biodiversity conservation and other energy conservation, similar things like that, we have invested quite heavily. In terms of wildlife conservation, one of our main projects is, of course, Jetwing Villuena, where we literally created it's a man-made wetland sanctuary now, which was once a barren paddy field. So that is something very unique that we have been able to do 15 years ago, or before that when it started construction. So that is, I would say, our landmark project in terms of biodiversity conservation. And in addition to that, how we also, a particular example within that space is also the low risk conservation project, which I can touch on more given the time. But also we have, I mean, everywhere around our properties, we do some work in terms of conserving biodiversity and energy in very serious ways. But we'll do it as one example. I think that is something that has really highlighted us.
I think Viluina has really been your shining star. Maybe you could also touch on some other work that I'm fairly familiar with that your other properties do, the rainwater harvesting, the solar power. Maybe you'd like to touch on a few of those for us?
Yeah, so I mean, it's always better when things are given in numbers, I think. So just to maybe clarify certain things, with probably we do have properties spread across the island. So even in terms of the investments we have made now, we are able to quantify some of those things. So I mean, what my dad always says is some of these decisions you can't look at a balance sheet or financial analysis and take this call. You need to do it from the heart. You need to decide to do it with the right intentions, and of course the numbers will follow, whether it's your financial return later in the long term or genuinely doing something good for the planet. It will come eventually, but the call to do that, I think it has to come from the heart. With, I mean, even Javana and Souhaine, when they were talking, you can tell that they genuinely wanted to do something different with the right intention. So anybody doing things like that, the rewards will come later. But just to quantify some of the numbers that we do on an average year, we got the numbers from 2019, which is also not the busiest year in Sri Lanka for obvious reasons. But I mean, 2018 was probably a busier year. But on an average year, roughly, we generate about 1,100 megawatts of electricity through solar power. We reduce the use of 33,000 kilograms of LPG by using biomass as power for our staff cafeterias. We purify over 52,000 cubic meters of water through the rainwater harvesting and other water recycling that we do at our properties, even the sewerage and other wastewater. We also generate about 25,000 cubic meters of biogas, which is also used for various reasons, that is generated through waste. It's basically methane that is then used for gas stove as an alternative to gas in the stoves. We also, on an average year, reduce close to 500,000 single-use plastic bottles through our own glass water bottling plants, which we have at most of our properties, where, similar to what Javana was also saying, we have our reverse osmosis plants. We then add the minerals and then bottle it ourselves. We have about 8 plants around the country, and that we supply our hotels with. So that is a different way where we have minimized the use of plastic in operations. Even in terms of amenities, everything, we reduce single-use plastics as much as possible wherever it's feasible. There are some areas like in the kitchen where for the HACCP standards you need to use plastic. So in those cases it is still not possible, but whenever there are alternatives available, we always go ahead with a more sustainable option. And in addition to that, we have also created over 1,100 opportunities for youth. I mean, it's a different type of sustainability initiative that we do through our Jetwing Youth Development Project, where we give free education and training. And so far in the last 15 years, we have given over 1,100 opportunities, employing local youth in the areas, giving them opportunities at our hotels. Since we were also talking about Viluina, to give it some quantification, before the habitat was created, there was a survey done in 2005 where we had recorded 12 mammal species, 29 bird species, 24 butterfly species, and 3 species of amphibians and reptiles. Today, there was another independent survey done in 2020. So giving about 13 to 14 years for the habitation to take over. We recorded 27 species of mammals, 148 species of birds, 51 species of butterflies, and 44 species of amphibians and reptiles. So as you can see, it was a man-made wetland, but by allowing nature to take over, we have created a habitat which is now very much a wetland sanctuary.
Yeah.
Hashan,
those figures really make you see the impact that these efforts make. And I think the example of Vilyuina and the biodiversity is, people speak a lot of over-tourism, and there's a perception that anywhere you go, put in a larger property, you will have negative impacts on the environment. But I think that's a clear example of how, with the right measures, the biodiversity has increased so much rather than reduce. I'd also like to now move on to another topic with the entire of our panel. We'd like to focus a bit more on wildlife and the interconnectivity to our tourism industry. Javana, I'd like to come back to you. Could you talk to us specifically about the work that you do in elephant conservation?
Well, I don't really do that much in elephant conservation because there are so many conservationists out there like Dr. Sumit Pilapitia, Pruthuviraj, Fernando, Manori, and many others who do a lot of elephant. I do assist them in every way possible, but taking into consideration what we are doing in our properties, for instance, the property in Arugambe and the property that we have on the borders of the northwestern part of Yala National Park, is we have an open concept, so we have no fencing. And since we are really on the buffers of the national park, there's a lot of movement of not only elephants, but so many other animals going through our property. And we have to realize that we are actually on their path. And we need to start coexisting with them rather than they try and coexist with us. And I think that's where the concept changes. And also, whilst doing that, the villagers in and around our properties, we try to explain to them as well how they should coexist with elephants. There is really not an elephant-human conflict in this country. If you really analyze it well, I think when Dr. Sumit Pilapitia was for a short period of time the wildlife conservator, wildlife director, wildlife, they analyzed the number of human deaths from elephants and why that really happened. And it was amazing to see what sort of outcome that came. It was really not the elephant's fault. It was on a very large percentage people that were drunk, that didn't see the elephant, that were drunk, that were cycling without lights, and so many other things. So you can't constantly blame an elephant for having an elephant-human conflict. Actually, the humans that have created this. And I think somewhere down the line, you have to move out. And with our two concepts, we really have elephants right next to our camp. We have them right next to our tents. We've never had an issue where the elephants have broken into our kitchen or broken into our stores to take any food, because we made it very clear to all our staff that everything has to be managed very well. And as long as you manage your properties well, the elephants will walk right through your property without absolutely any harm done to either the humans or the properties. So I think it's coexistence that we've managed to do over the last 15, 20 years with the elephant and with so many other animals that have created, that sort of harmony that we can live in their property, more like it.
I think you've made it clear that it's their territory and that we've just moved in there. Yes. Javana, something that we also find inspiring is that you do work with quite a lot of conservation organizations. Could you just touch on maybe one or two, because I'm sure that some of our listeners could be inspired with that work that you do?
Well, it's all on a voluntary basis. It's just that we are in these areas where we have the Department of Wildlife Conservation that we work very closely with. And then on top of that, a Department of Forest Conservation. They are the holders of all our forested lands in that sense. Parts of it is coast conservation, the mangrove areas. We work with coast conservation as well. With Wildlife Department, I would say they have an open telephone line to us in case they need any assistance from us. They lack a lot of vehicles and they lack mobility. So we are always at, just a telephone call away in case they have a problem with an animal that's injured that needs to be taken to one of their vets or to their veterinary places, or if there's some anti-poaching stuff that's taking place, or anything related to the protection of the national parks. We have been very open and very helpful whilst we were in the park, as well as now whilst we're out. And with Forest Department, we work a lot with the local how do you say, the field assistants, the beat forest officer, the range forest officer, the area forest officers within that area, they have they continue to demarcate new lands to take into forest conservation protection. So as we speak, I think there is a big program where they are demarcating large tracts of land of other state forests that they can take into and gazette as new forest areas. So we've been helping them a lot on ground for them to sort of demarcate these areas, because again, they're short of staff, they're short of vehicles, they're short of, you know, GPS equipment. And so in that sense, we help them in that sense as well. Yeah.
Javana, your support might be informal, but there's certainly a lot there.
Yeah, well, it's all informal, I must say, yes.
Hashan, I'd like to direct the next question at you. Something that we really love is how Jetwing puts conservation on par with commercial return. Could you speak to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like I said before, quantifying the commercial return can be difficult sometimes because you're not, if you do something today, you may not see the benefit, the commercial benefit of that immediately. It'll be, 20, 30 years down the line sometimes. But I would say, just to give you an example of one of the, measures that we have done. I briefly touched on it before, the Loris conservation project at Jetwing Luena. So how it actually started, if I could maybe give a little introduction to the project itself. Basically, how it started was around, Villuena started in 2006, started operating in 2006. And in 2010, there was a discussion to add more rooms in a particular land within the property premises. But the land that was actually demarcated for that, our resident naturalist at the time, Chaminda, who is still at the property, what he said was, he did a research there, and he said, he came and told my dad. At that time, I was not really involved. He came and told my dad, sir, please don't do this. I spotted the loris here. It's still an endangered animal locally, and he said, we can do a lot of research on this and use his land for that purpose. So when he actually said that, my dad said, okay, if you're confident about it, if you are really passionate about conserving this animal, we'll dedicate this land for that. So today since then we have 4 acres of land dedicated for the conservation of the loris. We now have a research center. We have the loris trail that we do. And even in terms of the habitat that we have created overall, today you can see loris not only within the 4-acre conservation site, but even within the entire property premises, which is roughly 28 acres. Sometimes you find loris in the reception, in the rooms, all of that. So what it goes to show is, you create a safe haven for the animal. They realize, okay, I'm not endangered here. They're not cutting down these trees. They're not coming out to kill me or, hurt me. Our guests are informed and educated on the animals at the property. So again, it's maybe not for everybody, but for those who are into a little more adventure, into more nature-based tourism, it is definitely somewhere that a lot of people love to go. And like that, so now the animals are available everywhere. Since we started in 2011, we've recorded more than 25 newborns. So there have been twins, there have been, individuals born in the last 11 years alone. So there's a lot more to be done. And in terms of the commercial return in the short term, we have a dedicated loris conservation fund that we started in 2011. We do charge a fee for tourists who come and experience the loris trail at the property. And then through that fund, we use the funds, we utilize the funds for various projects, for buying new equipment to, do more extensive research. We have done work with the community. We built a library in the area. All of those things we were able to do purely from this conservation project. So those are, you're not only adding benefits to your property, but also to the local community. And more than that, or sometimes it's okay, you can't really quantify it, but the PR attention you get, the marketing benefit overall, being invited to speak at events like this or other events around the world or in the country, Those are the, the projects you do with more love and care. It may not make sense sometimes on a piece of paper, but once you do it, you start really living it, and then you will definitely see benefits. So can be commercial benefits for sure, but also the other benefits around it.
I think you start off not really thinking of the commercial benefits, but over time, you've also been able to see those results. Another very interesting property of yours is Jetwing Yala, simply because of where you're located. Do you want to share a few words of how, in terms of biodiversity, you've still been able to maintain a large property there when you really border one of the most important national parks in Sri Lanka?
Yeah. So actually similar to what Javana said, since our inception, my grandfather actually always believed that tourism cannot exist in isolation. It has to benefit the local communities and the environment. So, and wherever we have our properties, we always work very closely with the local community. And if you have been to some of our properties, you may have noticed that none of our hotels, none of the Jetwing hotels have fences or borders or walls around the property itself, maybe except in a city or somewhere. But all our resorts are not like that. We encourage, the local community also be involved. And, through that, we create that, the feeling that, okay, we are foreigners coming there. We are outsiders coming into your hometown, but we want you to feel welcome as well. We show them love and care, and they show us love and care. If you go and, if you bolster your way through, then they're naturally going to be upset with you. So first you have to look after the humans. Once you do that, then you look after the animals as well. So even in Yala, like you said, we don't have any fences around the property, being pretty much inside the national park. There was recently a video that was going around as well, where the elephant actually, Natakota actually walked through our property as well. So like that, he's pretty much there half the time at the hotel under a tree or something. It's not that we feed him. It's not like we force him to come there. We do have complications sometimes, but overall, we are loved. There's wild boar, there's deer, there's all sorts of animals. Sometimes even a leopard has probably come once or twice. So whether you're in a national park, whether you're in a city, the same philosophy works everywhere. You open your doors and you treat people and animals with respect, and they will respect you back.
Thanks, Hashan. Some really great points there. We want to take a deep dive now into the all-important area of visitors and their experience. Souhaine, I'd like to come back to you for this question. What's the shift you see in your visitors from the time they arrive to the time they depart?
Well, you see them healing. I mean, just spending the quality time in there, and we've seen them spending longer times. They enjoy the forest bathing, basically, and the nutrition, a yogic way of life, basically. That's the wellness that's shared with them. So they love the therapies, and it's now more than ever, it's in demand. People come from different walks of life, different struggles. And I think what we practice is less is more.
Yeah.
And we believe that the simplest things is ultimate eventually. And as much as we are responsible, we need to be accountable for what we offer. So,
sure.
And we have done enough convincing of ourselves of a lot of greenwashing for different gains, and we have made mistakes in the past. So we have to sustain and continue with those mistakes, some of them. And we try to convince ourselves that this is the way forward, the only way forward to protect our interests. So I think the client feels that today. And they do demand for more healing, more quality of wellness.
Yeah.
And go as friends. They come as a guest, but leave as a friend eventually. And
yeah.
Yeah.
To go into a few specifics, you mentioned nourishment, right? And how does that differ in your property? What do you do that's different?
I mean, we avoid refrigeration, for instance. All our meals are freshly are prepared and sourced all locally and as organic as possible. We have never served a piece of meat there, and the client has never demanded any meat ever. People come expecting a certain life-changing, I mean, basically the client is put on a spot. What typically happens in a larger operation is a client has to request for something, for the type of food they want or whatever. Here, the client is put in the spot and introduced to something better, which they have not experienced before. So it stimulates the senses completely, where they put in the spot and they appreciate it.
Yeah.
And that's what they come back for. And it's educating people in all aspects of a complete lifestyle change and a healing process. And that's in demand. And that's what people come to places like Sri Lanka. As Malik said before, they don't come here for shopping or, casinos or so. This is what we need to be sustainable about. So, and being accountable for what we offer.
Sure.
Because we're not going to head anywhere.
Yeah. So, Souhaine, do you feel that with COVID and with people having the time to reflect on their life, do you think that people would be more interested in this type of offering? They'd appreciate it more? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I mean, as I said before, just people want that time off. People are coming from a very stressful experience. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have everything going for us. And it's just securing it sustainably and protecting it is all we have to do. And that's what we are struggling to do right now from multiple levels. So also it's our responsibility where we need to protect all our sites so that it can sustain, so I think it's only going to increase. So I think it's our responsibility to offer that wellness and heal people
and that healing to these audiences. Souhaine, I think it would be really interesting for the SMEs who are listening in to know that while your offering is authentic and 100% local, you still actually attract very high spending clientele. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I think the SMEs do quite a bit of the work in curating these experiences. And what the SMEs got to understand is the best of the places are around them. It could be the 150-year-old tree, or just a single tree, just sitting under the tree, just watching the day go by. That's what people want. People don't want to stare at a screen, a digital screen anymore. People don't want to be online anymore. And just getting people off to the old school lifestyle is what they need. And as SMEs, it's spread out so much. And you don't need most of the infrastructure. For example, you have a chemical-driven a swimming pool, for example. When you can have a nice natural pool instead, which is the closest river around there, the lake around there, or the beach. Likewise, every little bit affects us. So 80% of the swimming pools in the country doesn't have a treatment plant for its wastewater. So it all goes into our groundwater, but we don't care about it. But we're not aware about it. It's a lot of ignorance out there. So when there is a gorgeous natural pool, let's say just a nice stroll away or a couple of minutes away, why not utilize that? It's just investing in another pool and adding this chemical into your groundwater again. So it's little things, and curating those experiences, I think the SMEs have the potential to do that. And I think looking around and curating it and getting it going is, I think, the hope for the SMEs, to survive with this time of period.
So, picking up on some stuff you say about, for instance, the ingredients that you use, which seem to be sourced from around you, is there a benefit, again, so that our SMEs could maybe pick up on something? is there a benefit in terms of the true cost? Because it sounds like your ingredient inputs may be of lower cost, but the satisfaction to the guest is actually higher. Is there anything you could share?
Yeah, I mean, it's a simple thing. I mean, sometimes we try to, people try to basically sell you a steak, for example.
Yeah.
Is been brought the carbon footprint of a steak from New Zealand here, and it's been there for 2 months, 3 months, frozen. You're trying to offer a steak and say you can offer young jack. It's a superfood, which is commonly available, but is overlooked severely.
Yeah.
That's why just little, I mean, lotus roots, or it could be the simplest thing, food around, and murunga, yeah, is a superfood. But we do never serve it. It's not good enough here. So why not? You know, I mean, so what we do is we give, feed people all the what's local. We support local. We encourage people to go local, and the client appreciates it. An authentic, conscious, soulful experience. So that's what that word is. What spreads, and word of mouth is what keeps us sustaining.
Thanks so much on that, Souhaine. Javana, I'd like to come back to you. There's probably many things that your customers love about your offering, but what surprises and delights them the most?
When it comes to safaris, for instance, everyone talks about Africa's Big Five, and we now also have our Sri Lankan Big Five. But I think what you need to also offer or even inform the clients or educate the clients is that it's not really the Big Five. Yes, the big.
I think we may have lost Javana for a moment. Can the others hear him, or? I'll just move on to Hashan for a moment, and shall we wait for Javana to reconnect after that?
He's back. He's back.
Javana, we lost you there for a bit. Do you mind? You were just telling us about the Big Five in Sri Lanka and moving on from that, but we lost you there. Could you please continue?
Okay, well, I was just talking about not only the Big Five, but the small 5,000 that we offer as well. And I think that is very important because that is what we are here in Sri Lanka. It's all about Sri Lanka's wilderness experience rather than wildlife experience, because we have so much to offer. From all our reptiles, from all our birds and butterflies, from like Hashan mentioned, the loris. You know, not many people even know that there's a loris. And you go out there and Willow shows you a loris. I mean, for some people, it's almost like a shock because it looks alien. So I think it's important that we Sri Lankans actually educate the clients that come to Sri Lanka on really the amount of diversity we have, whether it's fauna or flora. And I think that is where we spin the client around at camp and show them even just in and around camp. Even if before you go to a national park, you can show so much in and around your property itself. And I think it's important that you actually get them focused on what really Sri Lanka has and the bounty we have. It's just unbelievable, you know. And like Souhaine said, so many things we can eat. If it's a vegetarian coming to Sri Lanka, my God, we can keep him here for 3 years and feed him almost something new every day, because there is so much to offer. And lots of Sri Lankans, a lot of the tourism sector don't look at that side. And I think it's so important that we have to show that to the client and educate the client on really the diversity that we have here in Sri Lanka. So getting back to my question, I would say the small 5,000. Okay. And we spin them around with that very easily. Yeah.
Thank you on that. Hashan, one more question to you again.
Yes.
As international travel resumes, our markets are recovering and we now find things are looking much better. What kind of travel experiences are you seeing in demand?
Well, definitely, I would more than previous years. There is a high demand now for Ayurveda and other wellness offerings. There is also more for nature-based tourism, more for, serene locations where you have, more space, more bigger opportunity to reconnect with nature, because, people, especially in Europe or similar areas around the world, people have been confined to small places for so many, days and months. People just want to get out and experience the world. There is a huge pent up demand. So most of the tourists come in now. Even the last few months, we have been getting a few tourists coming in. What they also say is, for them, just walking onto a beach or walking into nature, experiencing some of our attractions with very few, other visitors is something amazing, because, what I think what COVID has done is it has made people appreciate what's around you more. I mean, you're not now only confined to your room or your living room or your computer. You now have the opportunity to experience the world again. And I think that's something we always took for granted. And now people appreciate that more. So whenever they travel, like even Souhaine was saying, people don't just want to come and, swim in a pool, have a good meal and go back. You want to, experience the destination you're going to. And to do that, you definitely need to spend more time in each destination. So of course, you can't cater to everything, but depending on the traveler that is coming to Sri Lanka, we need to, be able to inform our partners in the industry, whether it's our agents in Sri Lanka or our agents and operators overseas. We inform them, okay, based on this client's requirements, these are the places that, you can spend a bit more time if they want to, spend more time in nature, places like that. So definitely there are changes, not huge changes yet. We haven't seen a huge change yet, but there is a inclination to more wellness travel and nature-based travel.
Sure. I'd like to move on to our final questions for today, before we move on to the audience questions, that is. Javana, back to you. Can you give us some pointers on how local tourism operators can start supporting conservation in their own businesses?
Well, I think they just have to look out of the window and see what they have around them. There is so much, like Souhaine said, and like also Hashan said, they are going also into smaller properties. I think the small and medium enterprise area can actually benefit with all that we have to offer around Sri Lanka. And they just have to look out their window. They have to be authentic. They have to start looking at new things that haven't been shown before. You take the coconut industry, for instance, it's untouched. Not many people coming to Sri Lanka see the huge potential that Sri Lanka has with coconut. And I mean, the trickle-down effect of a coconut industry. You can have a guy running a coir mill who can be a person that can attract a huge volume of clients, educating them on what that part of the coconut does to the whole world, for instance. From the cocoa peat to the coir blankets that are all sent into Europe. You can have one guy doing pepper cultivation, and half the people don't know pepper even grows on a vine, and you educate them about that, and they think it's a completely different peppercorn, black pepper and white pepper. I mean, simple things are this. You just have to be a little more innovative. And we have so many people out there, but you have to guide them. I mean, we from Haritha, for instance, we guide our local guys, from the guy who cleans or the ladies that clean cashew. We educate them to clean cashew and show people, show the clients how cashew is cleaned. That itself is an attraction. And that is a link to tourism as well. Everything is a link to tourism if it is sort of, directed the right way. And there is so much potential. You don't need to have everyone running in three-wheelers and try to take a client or a three-wheeler. There is so much more that you can offer. And I think it's important for people like us to guide the local people as to what they can actually do with what they have in their garden, for instance, or what they're growing. And that's what we've been doing a lot in Haritha and also in Matara and also in Yala, for instance, just to educate clients that they get a benefit. And like I think someone mentioned in the first webinar, is you have to give a trickle-down effect to the local people. It is so imperative. Whether it's wildlife tourism, whether it's agro-based tourism, whether it's what Souhaine does, it is so important that the locals realize that they are part and parcel of this protection. if we don't get them involved, there is no success here, absolutely no success. And we need to promote that and show that to the government sector, the relevant department officials, that there is potential out there and that they need to give a little more free hand for the private sector to come in and assist them in guiding them on the right path.
Yeah.
That's a big problem. With wildlife department, we have a huge problem. They are so narrow-minded. With forest conservation department, they're so narrow-minded. They have to open up. They have to see what the world is doing with conservation and forests, because we are dotted with all of that. We just don't know how to manage it. And getting back to so being, I think local knowledge and being authentic, just doing something that you can do in your little cocoon and show a foreigner something new. I think that is a concept that we should follow.
Thanks, Javana. Hashan, another question directed to you. What are the benefits now? Jetwing is a larger company. You've been investing over many, many years. What are the benefits that you have seen back into your business of having invested in wildlife and conservation support? And I think you did touch on this before. Some of the long-term savings that you have seen, maybe the impact that it has in terms of attracting the conscious traveler. Just a few final words you'd like to share with us.
Yeah, Niranga, just to keep it quick. I mean, like I was talking before, it's in addition to the actual benefit that you're giving to the environment and the long-term benefits of that for everybody, because if you lose the environment that we have, the precious assets that Sri Lanka has, I mean, that's what people come here to see. If we lose that, then there's no point in having tourism in Sri Lanka. So that is definitely the biggest benefit, which we won't actually see today, but maybe 25, 50 years down the line, when things, when shit really hits the fan, then we'll realize, oh no, then it's too late. We need to do the changes now, or even if you're not doing it before, change now. And that really has an impact moving forward. And apart from that, like I was saying, we also have a lot of marketing benefits that come from it. We get invited to speak at various events. I mean, for example, the low-risk conservation story has been featured by the National Geographic. BBC Wild has done the full story on this, spent a couple of months at the property. So like that, there are many opportunities for businesses, even SMEs, everybody. The more you do, the more you can talk about, and the more experiences, like Javana was saying, it's all about the experiences now. The more unique things which sometimes we take for granted, like what he was saying about the peppercorns, even Sri Lankans don't know. So there are so many things that we need to educate Sri Lankans first, and then they can go and share that with the world, get people to come here and experience that. So that is definitely moving forward the benefits that we will see.
Thanks, Hashan. I'd like to move on to some questions from the audience. I've just picked a few at random, and we'll see how many we can quickly fit in. So one question that has come through is, what works best to market or tell your story to the customer? Any of you can answer. Souhaine had some very interesting points on word of mouth. Would you maybe like to share examples or anything that you'd like to speak on?
Visuals say 1,000 words. So social media is very strong today. It's a powerful tool that can be utilized and getting the word out there. And I mean, as I said, as really Hashan has mentioned, that unique experiences, curating them and putting them out there and getting them out through social media. And also, as I said before, it's having that having accountable experiences and not selling it off a short-term gain, because realistically we're just running out of time. I mean, there is no 20 years for us. We are burning the candle on both ends at a very fast pace. And the last 3 years we've seen so much happening, devastation happening, from the wetlands to losing of hundreds of acres or thousands of acres. So we have the stories to get out there, but we need to have positive stories. We need to have conservation. We need to have if you have to go sustainable. So I think it's important. We have the tools. It's how people get it out there, and that will sustain on its own. You see, people will come in to support it. People come and speak. So it's that chicken or egg situation.
Yeah. I think you're also focused on creating the right experiences so that the users generate their own content for social media as well.
Markets on its own, actually. If the experience is positive and good, there's a return of the client, and people speak about it, people share their experiences, and it sells on its own. And there is actually no need to market. People are searching for it if it's properly done. So it's, as I said, it's the consciousness of the sustainability is what's crucial.
The truth behind it. I'm going to move on to another question. Can the panelists suggest any organizations, free or paid, that they believe are worth joining as small businesses to collaborate, gain skills or credibility in that space? Maybe any of y'all can, even each of y'all can tell us an organization or two that are good to collaborate with for SMEs that could support their businesses.
In what way?
I think just for instance, whether it's the wildlife department, whether it's any NGOs, people who support in educating you or, educating SMEs or people in the community. I believe that's what the question is directed at.
Well, I think Tourism Alliance is a great thing.
No, everything is available online as well. So you can do your research online, learn from people like Javana, Souhaine, everybody who has done different concepts and doing it successfully. It's not rocket science. I think you do things with the right intentions, and also there's so much information available online now. So without depending too much on organizations, I think sometimes, of course, things like Tourism Alliance, which is a collective of like-minded companies. In addition to that, there are many opportunities to learn yourself and get things going. That's
and I guess that's crucial because there's all that free information out there for you to learn from without actually becoming formal paid members of different places as well. So that's great.
Of course, there are a lot of specialized organizations, whether it's for wellness, whether it's, there are specialized organizations, there is a benefit of being involved. But in addition to that, also, it's worthwhile, doing your own research and getting to know the new trends.
I'm mindful of time. So from me, thank you, Javana, thanks, Souhaine and Hashan, for your time. Thanks to our virtual audience. But before we end, I'd like to hand over to Malik for him to share a few final words with us.
Hi, everybody. It's really been a fascinating session. I think a lovely culmination to the two-part webinar. And we will take this forward in terms of specific things that members of the Alliance can do. The question about which organizations, I fully agree with Hashan, you've got to have a passion and you've got to also self-learn. You can't just outsource, just as Javana said, he learned from his parents. You just can't outsource the job of making you more sustainable. You've got to be passionate. You've got to understand the urgency and the crisis we face and the value to travelers, the modern traveler, from being ecologically aligned like these three gentlemen. And then the Tourism Alliance has a lot of tools on the portal, but it's really all about self-learning. I'd just like to make a few comments in summing up. We have to wake up to the concept of responsible tourism. I think that's more appropriate now rather than ecotourism, which people still keep thinking is kind of a niche. So it's all about responsible tourism and move away from the old school model because, we had this 30-year-old conflict and pretty much our tourism product picked up in 2009, where it left off in the 1980s, 1990s. Many of our businesses really are outdated in terms of how we approach it and what we consider important to our businesses. So some of you might say, look, I'm not in a rustic, area. I'm not in a rural area. I really don't have that passion and that drive. I don't understand anything about how I protect elephants or whatever. But A, you've got to learn. Secondly, you've got to understand the importance it is for your business. And also the fact that the reason that we as hoteliers, we have clients is because of the overall Sri Lanka positioning. So if you are a hotelier in Hikkaduwa or in Yala, what's happening in Minneria at the gathering, which in the tourism industry, no one is really talking about, is going to have a direct impact on your bookings. It is your problem. It is not somebody else's problem. Because if the gathering dies, as it seems to be, and it can be quite easily reversible through steps government can take and the industry needs to lobby, it will get more travelers to Sri Lanka and to your property in Hikkaduwa, which you might think is 200 miles away from Minneria. But there is a direct correlation because it is that whole biodiversity that makes people consider Sri Lanka in the first place. We've heard conscious traveler, and that's something that I think Souhaine epitomizes, and that is a very strong trend. Community integration. Our people are very warm and caring. We can't build these walls. The kind of product we have in Pasikuda, where you've got maybe 15 hotels with very tall walls, like a concentration camp, and the community is excluded. I mean, that is the worst kind of model, and that's the last thing that tourists want. And that perhaps is one reason why that area isn't doing too well. That is not integrated at all with the local community. Guests are just stuck in the property day and night, whereas the integration, where they can, link with the local community, however big or small, you can integrate with the local community. And I think that's something we also learned today about integration. Slow travel, longer stays. We are seeing that trend already. Longer stays means people want to connect with your location. So whether it is the Loris project at Vil Uyana or what Javana is doing in terms of the human-elephant conflict, or Souhaine's, bathing in the river or the stream that he has, that is what keeps people staying longer in your property. And that obviously means higher yields with more attractions. And everything you do, from a fossil fuel avoidance, as we heard what Jetwing does, to community engagement, is a guest attraction. Please remember that, because hotels as a conventional product with buffets and dormitories and so on is very cookie cutter. So why do you want people coming and staying in your hotel and then going out to Galle Fort or to Sigiri or whatever? Create attractions within your property. You see, that's a strong marketing tool, and that also means that you have a longer length of stay. And the modern traveler is looking at positive impact. They want to travel with purpose. So you need to give them reasons for that. Whatever your product is, as Javana said, look out the window. You could say, look, I'm in a very urban area. What can I do? But there are many things you can do, and please reach out to these gentlemen afterwards. You'll know how to reach them if you want any tips. I think it's too late for sustainable. I think the word is regeneration, like we saw at Vil Uyana. So we have to look at regeneration, because sustainability is staying put, protecting what we have. But we've already lost a lot. So you have to regenerate. And those are some of the areas that we should be looking at. My final point, sorry, I don't want to ramble, but lots of thoughts came to me listening to them, is that this ROI. So you have an ROI increasingly on fossil fuel avoidance and on renewable power. So obviously solar, there is a fabulous ROI, but similarly on so many other projects, recycling, reusing, avoiding plastic bottles, using glass, all of that has an ROI. It's not a nice to do thing. It is something which is increasingly economically viable. So it is something that makes perfect commercial sense. It shouldn't be something you do only because you're altruistic and you want to save the world. Maybe that was when these gentlemen started 10 or 15 years ago. We all thought he was quite mad, but actually in the current context, it actually is economically viable. It goes directly to your bottom line. So with that, I'd like to sum up. Final thank you to behind the scenes, the hardworking Tourism Alliance team, Nishanti, Mandy, and Catherine. Thank you so much for organizing and building up to this. Thank you, Javana, Hashan, Souhaine, for your really valuable contributions. And if I may offer on behalf of those watching, if people would like to reach out to you, just to get some insights, and we could do some blog posts for the Alliance to send out in our newsletters. That would be very useful. Maybe we can do some video filming of what you're doing at your projects. Thank you, Niranga, for, as usual, your brilliant moderating, asking all the pertinent questions. Our next webinar series will be on guest experiences and visitor management at tourism sites such as Sigiri and Yala. There are some straightforward solutions proposed by experts. We look forward to discussing that probably in December. And this is now more urgent than ever with the expectation of a decent high season, and the parks and the sites are going to get busy. How do we avoid them becoming chaotic and such turnoffs for travelers and all the negative posts you see on social media, which obviously has a direct booking impact on future bookings. So that is going to be the next discussion that we have. And we look forward to you guys tuning in. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, panelists.